She had just lost the biggest match of her career. The cameras were rolling. The whole nation of the Philippines was still awake, still watching, still hoping. And when Eala sat down in that press room, nobody knew what she was about to say. This wasn't going to be a routine, tough match, better luck next time answer. What came out of her mouth in the next few minutes was raw, it was honest, and it revealed exactly what 2 weeks at Wimbledon had actually cost her and given her. By the end of this video, you'll understand why her words after this loss mattered just as much as anything she did on the court. Let's go back to the beginning, because to understand why this press conference hit so hard, you need to understand what Eala was carrying onto center court in the first place. For years, Philippine tennis had been waiting for a moment like this. Not just a good run, not a nice story that fades in the second round, a real moment, the kind that stops an entire country and gathers families around a screen in the middle of the night. And for 2 weeks in London, Eala delivered exactly that. She opened her tournament with a win over Renata Zarazua, followed it with a win over Maya Joint, and then in the third round produced the single greatest result of her career, a straight sets win over defending champion Iga Swiatek, a 6-time Grand Slam winner. That victory made her the first Filipino player in history to reach that stage of a Grand Slam. It sent her name trending across the world. It made total strangers who had never watched a tennis match in their lives suddenly know her serve motion and her fist pump. Then came the round of 16, and with it the toughest test of her tournament. Waiting on the other side of the net was Jasmine Paolini, a former world number 4 and 2-time Grand Slam finalist, a player who already had a personal score to settle. Eala had actually beaten Paolini earlier in the year at the Dubai Championships, and the Italian came into this rematch determined not to let it happen twice. What followed was a genuine battle. Paolini took the first set 6-4. Eala fired back and leveled things with a 6-4 second set of her own. It all came down to a decisive third set on a scorching hot center court, in front of a crowd that included Roger Federer and Billie Jean King watching from the royal box. Paolini finally broke through in the 7th game of that final set, after a grueling deuce battle, closing out the match 4-6, 6-4, 3-6 in 2 hours and 21 minutes.
And when it ended, Eala didn't hide from the moment. She walked into that press room and, when asked about the experience, she didn't reach for excuses. She said it plainly. It had been a really challenging match, Jasmine had played great, and she had given everything she had. She said she was proud of that, and that she had to be proud of what she'd achieved that week. Then she added something that says a lot about where her head was in that moment, that she was leaving with positive thoughts. Not bitterness, not devastation dressed up for the cameras, positive thoughts after the biggest loss of her career, on the biggest stage she'd ever played on. When a reporter pushed further, asking her to reflect on the whole journey, her first 4th round at a Grand Slam, she didn't hesitate. She talked about how she'd handled the pressure. She said there's pressure every single week on tour, and that the more you want something, the more that pressure builds. And then she said something that revealed just how self-aware she is for a 21-year-old suddenly carrying a nation's hopes. She said she was happy with how she faced it head-on, that she'd kept cool when she needed to, controlled her emotions, and performed the best she could on that day. That's not the language of someone crumbling. That's the language of someone who understands exactly what she just did, win or lose. There was one more moment in that press conference that stuck with people. When asked whether there were things she'd have done differently, she didn't dodge it. She said of course there were things she wished she'd done differently, but that's just tennis. That's what's beautiful about it, she said, because every match is different. You're always searching for solutions, and your opponent is always trying to make you uncomfortable. She admitted her serve had been at its best that day, but she framed it simply. Everyone has days like that, and she doesn't expect to play the best tennis of her life every single time. It's part of the job. That kind of clarity, that kind of calm self-assessment in the immediate aftermath of the biggest defeat of her career is rare for a player at any age, let alone 21.
What made this press conference resonate so deeply wasn't a viral soundbite or a tearful breakdown. It was the opposite. It was a young athlete refusing to let one loss erase 2 of the greatest weeks of her career. She had just become the first Filipino to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam. She had just beaten a 6-time major champion on the most famous court in tennis. She had just made Roger Federer choose to sit in the royal box and watch her play. And instead of drowning in what she didn't get to finish, she stood in front of the cameras and said, essentially, "I did everything I could, and I'm proud of it." That composure didn't come from nowhere either. Even her opponent noticed it. Speaking in her own press conference afterward, Paolini had nothing but respect for what Eala brought to that match, calling her a tough opponent whose game was, in Paolini's words, close to perfect on grass, and admitting it had been a real battle to pull through. Coming from a former Wimbledon finalist who had to erase 21 unforced errors and dig deep in a decisive third set just to survive, that's not a courtesy compliment. That's respect, earned point by point over 2 hours and 21 minutes of tennis. And that's really the story here. Not a scandal, not a viral apology, not a young athlete breaking down under the weight of a nation's expectations, but a 21-year-old who walked off center court, sat down in front of the world's media, and told the truth. She competed as hard as she could. She's proud of her run, and she's already looking forward, carrying this experience as confidence rather than regret. In a sport that so often turns young players into symbols before they're ready to carry that weight, Eala handled the biggest moment of her career, win and loss both, with a maturity that a lot of veterans never quite find. So where does this leave her? She'll enter the US Open hardcourt season with a new career high ranking of world number 28, the confidence of having beaten a defending Wimbledon champion, and the validation of an entire tennis world now watching her every move. The loss to Paolini didn't erase what she built at Wimbledon. If anything, the way she talked about it afterward only added to it. This wasn't the end of a fairy tale. Based on everything she said in that press room, it sounds a lot more like the beginning of one. If you want to keep following Eala's rise, make sure you're subscribed, because after a run like this, her story is only getting started.